Whispered Wonder Tales, a children's audio drama channel. The Moonberry Forest, the forgotten song of the north wind. The deepest part of winter in the Moonberry Forest arrived with a peculiar kind of stillness, the kind of quiet that happens when the world holds its breath, waiting for something it can't quite name. Nella and Lumo had ventured deeper into the frozen wilderness than they'd ever traveled before, past the familiar white oaks and into the territory where the mountains rose like sleeping giants and the snow fell so thick it seemed to fall upward as well as down. They were searching for pine cones to bring back to the squirrels, who were running low on winter stores. But something felt wrong. "Lumo," Nella whispered, her dewdrop wings trembling slightly despite the cold. "The wind has stopped." She was right. The wind, which usually whistled through the winter forest like a living thing, carrying snow, shaping drifts, playing with branches, had vanished completely. The air hung still and heavy, almost suffocating in its silence. "Not stopped," Lumo corrected gently, his autumn leaf wings barely moving as he floated beside her. "Listen more carefully. It's there, but it's crying." And now that he mentioned it, Nella heard it too, a sound so faint, so distant, that it was almost like remembering something rather than hearing it. It was a wail, but not an angry one. It was the sound of profound loneliness, of abandonment, of a voice that had been calling out so long it no longer believed anyone would answer. The sound came from deeper into the frozen mountains, from a direction that made Nella's instincts scream to turn back. But Lumo's calm presence steadied her, and together they followed the sound. They passed through canyons so deep the sky seemed impossibly far away, over ice so clear it looked like glass, through passages where the cold was so intense it felt like it had weight and substance. The sound grew louder as they went, more desperate, more heartbreaking. Finally, they came to a place that took their breath away. It was a canyon, enormous and magnificent, carved from stone and ice so ancient that it seemed to hold memories in its very walls. And in the deepest part of the canyon, swirling endlessly, was the wind, but it wasn't moving. It was trapped, circling in the same patterns over and over again. A tornado of despair that had worn grooves into the very canyon walls through centuries of repetition. Where the wind touched the stone, icicles hung like crystallized tears. "Oh," Nella breathed, horrified and heartbroken. "Oh, the poor thing." "It's been doing this for so long," Lumo said softly, understanding immediately. "The same movements, the same patterns. It's forgotten how to be anything but trapped." As if sensing their presence, the wind suddenly stilled. For a moment, the entire canyon held its breath. Then, slowly, a form began to emerge from the swirling air. It was barely visible, more like a shimmer, a distortion in the air itself. But as Nella and Lumo's eyes adjusted, they could make out a shape. It was vaguely humanoid, with long flowing lines that seemed to move like fabric even when standing still. Where the wind spirit's form was most concentrated, the temperature dropped so severely that frost began forming on every surface. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of wind through a canyon, lonely and echoing. Someone came? The question was so small, so uncertain that it broke Nella's heart. "Yes," she called out gently, floating a little closer. "We heard you. We came to see if you needed help." The wind spirit made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. It was hard to tell which. "Help? No one has come to this place in so many years that I've forgotten. I've forgotten what help even means. What's your name?" Lumo asked, his voice carrying that special calm that seemed to settle over everything he spoke to. "I had a name once," the wind spirit said, and its form seemed to collapse in on itself. I was the North Wind. I had a purpose. I had a song. But that was so long ago that it feels like a dream someone else had. Now I'm just this, trapped, alone, forgotten." Nella floated closer, not so close as to startle the wind, but close enough to show she wasn't afraid. "We haven't forgotten you," she said warmly. "We came looking because we could feel your sadness even from far away. The forest feels it too, the way the wind doesn't dance anymore, the way it doesn't play with the snow like it used to." "The forest?" the North Wind asked, and for a moment its swirling form stilled with what might have been hope. "The Moonberry Forest? Still there? It's thriving," Lumo assured the wind. "But it misses you. Creatures talk about the old days when the North Wind would come and turn the snowfall into art, when it would help birds prepare their nests against the cold, when it would carry warmth to creatures who needed it." The North Wind made a sound of anguish. I remember that. I remember the way the snowflakes would dance to my song, the way creatures would gather to listen before winter truly came. But then, its form wavered uncertainly. Then I got stuck here. I was chasing a blizzard that seemed alive, and I followed it into this canyon, thinking I could help it, guide it, but instead I got trapped. And I've been here ever since, trying the same patterns over and over, hoping to break free, but forgetting more with each cycle why I was trying to break free in all. "Tell us about your song," Nella said gently. "You said you had a song. What did it sound like?" The North Wind was silent for a long moment. I don't remember. I've forgotten so much. The loneliness eats away at memory, like frost melts away warmth. I know I had a song. I can feel the echo of it, like remembering a dream you can't quite grasp, but the notes are gone. The words are gone. All that's left is the memory of having something I've lost." Lumo and Nella exchanged a look of deep understanding. They both knew what it was like to feel incomplete, to sense that something precious was missing from inside themselves. "Then let's remember it together," Lumo said with quiet determination. "Let's search for it. But how?" The North Wind asked, despair thick in its voice. "I've been alone for centuries. I've searched endlessly within myself and found only emptiness. Sometimes we can't find what we've lost by looking inward," Nella said thoughtfully. "Sometimes we need to look outward, to listen to what others remember about us, to let our story be told through more than just our own voice." "Come with us," Lumo offered. "Come back to the Moonberry Forest. Let the creatures who remember you help you remember yourself." The North Wind's form trembled. "I'm afraid," it admitted. What if I go back and I've changed so much that I don't fit anymore? What if I'm too broken, too lost? What if they've forgotten me too? Then we start from where we are, Nella said firmly. But I don't think they've forgotten you. I think they've been waiting for you, the same way you've been waiting to be found. It took time, gently coaxing, patient encouragement, small steps toward trust. But finally, the north wind agreed to leave the canyon. The moment it stepped out of that frozen prison, something extraordinary happened. The wind began to move differently. Instead of the frantic, repetitive patterns that had worn grooves into the stone, it moved with purpose. It still carried traces of centuries of loneliness and confusion, but underneath was the faintest echo of what it used to be. As they journeyed back through the mountains toward the Moonberry Forest, they didn't travel directly. Instead, Nella and Lumo took the north wind to places where it had once brought meaning and purpose. First, they went to the Valley of the Birds, where creatures spent their winters preparing for spring. The birds had always relied on the north wind's signal, its ancient song, to know when to begin their preparations. When they arrived, the birds gathered, and Nella explained the north wind's situation. An old raven, weathered by many winters, stepped forward. "I remember," the raven said, his voice creaking like old branches. "I remember the song. It started like this." And the raven began to hum, a melody so old and so achingly familiar that the north wind's form began to glow. "Yes," the north wind whispered. "Yes, that's it. That's the beginning." Other birds joined in, each remembering a fragment of the melody. A cardinal added a warbling flourish. A chickadee contributed a particular cadence. A jay added a powerful crescendo. Piece by piece, the ancient song began to reassemble itself, called back into existence by voices that had been waiting centuries to sing it again. But the melody remained incomplete. There was a section, the heart of the song, the most important part, that none of them could quite remember. "It's in here," the north wind said. And for the first time, its voice carried something like hope mixed with determination. "I can almost feel it. It's like trying to remember a dream while you're still waking up." They traveled next to the great pine forest, where creatures had always taken shelter during winter storms. An ancient pine tree, scarred by centuries of wind, but still standing strong, spoke in a voice like creaking wood. The missing part, the tree said slowly. It was the part of the song that promised protection. When you sang it, the wind would become gentle around our branches, would help settle snow on our needles in patterns that created shelter for the smaller creatures. The song was a promise that you would be fierce with those who could handle it, but gentle with those who were fragile. The forgotten song of the north wind, as the tree spoke. Something awakened in the north wind. Its form began to shimmer and shift. And suddenly, a melody poured out, not through any throat or mouth, but as a vibration in the very air itself. It was a song of contradictions, powerful and gentle, fierce and kind, wild and protective, ancient and ever new. It was the song of the north wind. Creatures from all across the forest came to listen. Rabbits emerged from their burrows. Deer stepped out from shelter. Even Nimbus the dragon left his cave, drawn by the music. They gathered in the snow and listened to the song that had called to their very essence, that had been woven into their winter survival for countless generations. And as the song continued, something miraculous happened. The north wind's form became more visible, more defined, more real. The loneliness that had clung to it like frost began to melt away. Its voice grew stronger, clearer, more confident with each measure, because it was no longer singing alone. The song was spreading through the forest, carried by wind and ice, by creatures who had learned it and were passing it on, by the forest itself, which seemed to remember its purpose. When the song finally reached its crescendo and faded into silence, the north wind stood, no longer a trapped, swirling mass of despair, but a magnificent figure of swirling snow and ancient power, but now with purpose and presence. "I remember," it said, and its voice was filled with wonder. "I remember who I am. I remember my song. I remember my purpose." "You never actually forgot," Lumo said gently. "You just forgot that you remembered. You forgot that your voice still mattered, that your presence still meant something." The north wind turned its attention to Nella and Lumo, and they felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it made their small forms tremble. "Thank you," it said simply. "Thank you for not letting me stay forgotten. Thank you for reminding me that I was worth remembering." "Will you stay?" Nella asked. "Will you sing your song again, help prepare the forest for winter, dance with the snowflakes like you used to?" "I will," the north wind promised. "And I will never forget again. Not the song, not my purpose, not that I was heard. Because being heard was what saved me. Your voices calling out, reminding me that I mattered, that was magic stronger than any enchantment." That winter, the Moonberry Forest experienced something it hadn't known for centuries: the return of the north wind's ancient song. The snowfall became beautiful and purposeful again. The wind danced with the flakes, creating patterns of such intricate beauty that creatures would gather just to watch. The cold became bearable because it carried with it a sense of protection and care. And as spring began to approach, the north wind's song changed, growing warmer, gentler, helping to ease the forest into the new season. Because now the north wind understood something profound, that power without purpose is just force. But purpose with companionship is magic. On the first truly warm day of early spring, when the snow began to melt and the first brave shoots of green pushed through the white, Nella and Lumo visited the place where they'd first found the north wind, the frozen canyon that had been its prison. The canyon was no longer silent. The north wind's song echoed through it, not as a cry of despair, but as a melody of freedom and purpose. Where the wind touched the ice, it began to melt, and water began to flow again through channels that had been frozen for centuries. "Do you think it will ever go back to being trapped?" Nella asked Lumo. "No," Lumo said with certainty, "because now it knows something crucial, that being heard breaks every kind of silence, that being remembered shatters every kind of loneliness, that one voice might feel small and insignificant, but when someone listens, when someone cares enough to help you remember who you are, that voice becomes powerful enough to change the world. And he was right. The north wind never forgot again, and every winter thereafter, creatures would gather to listen for its song, the ancient melody that had been lost for centuries, but was now sung again, carried on the wind, reminding every living thing that even the smallest voice matters, that loneliness can be broken by compassion, and that sometimes the greatest magic is simply being heard. In the Moonberry Forest, where even the wind has a voice that deserves to be heard, the song of the north wind still echoes through every winter, a reminder that no one is truly forgotten as long as someone remembers to listen, and that the most powerful magic comes from rediscovering your purpose through the eyes of those who see your worth. This is the end of the story, and we invite you to listen to the next radio play on our channel.